I don't know where Jim went. Maybe he went to the little boy's room. Hello, folks. Hello, all, for joining us. Usually, it's probably the intro that Jim. Oh, there he is. There's our man. All rise. Attaboy. Looks like we're in for a long session.
Never know.
No, absolutely. Well, Jim, listen, as always, dude, I can't thank you enough for all the guests that you bring to us to these fireside chats and around the fire. This one, especially just because he's near and dear to all of our hearts as Canadians, for what he's done, what he's accomplished, and what he's continuing to do. It's truly something we all marvel at, especially as Canadian anglers and Canadian followers of this man. I tip my hat to him. How do you feel? Because I'm sure you were pretty giddy all day about this.
Yeah, Dave's just a wonderful guy. I've known him since he was a young lad, and I took him fishing. I think he was like 13 or 14 when I took him fishing. You know, we went out on Skoogog for the day and had a great time. And man, he was up and down that boat, checked out every rod, was in every compartment, and we only caught one fish that day, and he got it.
And
so I hated him. I hated him for about 6 months.
I was going to say, he's held it against you for all these years, I'm sure.
Oh, it was funny. No, we just had one of those wretched days out there, and then he popped a good one close to the end of the day. It was funny though. But right, you know what? Something else though. You know, we didn't catch a lot of fish that day, but it also goes to prove that you, when you're having a good time in the boat with somebody, maybe you're not paying attention to what you're doing as much, you know. And yeah. We definitely had a great time in the boat. And he's blossomed into a wonderful person, a family man. He cares so genuinely about the people around him. It's I'm just honored to have known him from being such a young lad and growing up and watching how successful he's become. You know, I mean, not too many people get to be the MC at the Bassmaster Classic.
So we're gonna get to all that. And you're 100% right. And in terms of some stuff that happens in a boat that maybe you needed to pay a little bit more attention, we're gonna get to that too, Jim. Anyway, I
have to go. I just remembered I have a.
I'm going to apologize up front. We don't like putting you on the spot, but this was a classic clip.
I love it.
That we're going to show. But anyway, as you mentioned, highly regarded, often referred to as the Bill Dance of Canadian angling, voted most likely to succeed amongst all of his classmates and teachers. He is an 8-time Bassmaster Classic qualifier, including 9 FLW Cup appearances, and he is the host of the acclaimed Fact for Fishing, and I'm sure everybody knows about that, which I'm happy to say is going into its 15th year. He is also, and I would have to say this is the most dubious honor or esteemed honor, he is the cult leader of the ever-growing mercenaries. I don't know if you heard them, Jim, but these mercenaries are not to be matched with. Stay away from them if you come across them, because if they're anything like Dave, you never know what they're going to do. But also, he is the proud founder of the Casting for a Cure, which helps support the tireless efforts of the Canadian Cancer Society. So, without further ado, I'm going to introduce with this video our guest tonight, Dave Mercer.
That is a freak! Junior, tell Big Mama we're coming. Oh, man! That thing. Ooh. That is awesome.
Yeah, baby, there he is, the one and only Dave Mercer.
Hi. Okay, first of all, I hate intros, listening to intros, because I hate hearing anyone talk about me. But the best part is, guys, none of that crap was true. I've never been to an FLW event, never qualified for a Bassmaster Classic. I'm only qualified to hold the microphone. Just ask anybody who's ever fished with me. And the name of the show is Facts of Fishing. But other than that, it's great to be here.
Jim, where was I getting this information? You led me to or were you just making
the
this
internet?
Up?
Everything on the internet's true. So you must.
You got
You
me.
must have been there. You don't
Well,
forget.
there you go. You got me, Jim. Well, you know what? Let's just. I'm gonna just soak it in as you were there. It's how we feel about you, Dave. That you won all of them. Never mind, just showed up. You won them all.
No, I didn't. If I had him, I wouldn't have been a damn tournament MC. Let me just tell you that much.
Dave told me once. He says to me, "It's so great being the MC for the Bassmaster Classic," because he said I always wanted to go to the Bassmaster Classic, and he said the only way I knew I was going to get there was to be the MC. So,
yeah. And I mean, I think this is my 12th Classic coming up.
wow.
I have yet to win one, but every year I'm the second last dude standing on that stage.
All right. Well, listen, you've done 6 of these already today. This will be your 7th, and I have butchered it just as good as you can well imagine. So I'm hoping I get this right. We want to go through basically a little trip back in time. Okay. So that if anybody doesn't know about Dave Mercer or where Dave Mercer came from, these are some pretty cool facts that I'm going to share with you. Obviously, first introduced to fishing by his father and brother. You have, I'm sure, many great stories about what it was like being a kid, being shown what eventually became your passion. Dave, tell us a story if you've got one to share.
I got nothing. I mean, no,
you fell.
That'd be great. That'd be great. Sorry, absolutely. I got nothing.
No worries. But you fell in love with fishing at a young age, and you've managed to grow up at 13. Dave, I'm hoping I got this right. You entered your first tournament.
Yeah,
and you won that tournament.
No, I won $400 in it. I didn't win the tournament, but I won $400.
I'm telling you, this
was like.
Was it on Scugog?
It was, and weirdly enough, and I didn't even think about this until we had already lived here for a while. The exact spot that I fished was right out in front of where I now live. Way. Like I can see that area, so it's kind of cool.
That is hilarious. Well, that's great. Well, you know what? This is probably we're going to trip on this journey back in time, as we already have. So at 15, this is when you started innovative tackle design. Or
I'm glad you brought that up because I started other things at 15 too.
Okay, yeah, no. I wasn't going to go there.
You were a late bloomer.
Looking at it was there, so I'm glad I didn't write any of that down. And all names will remain nameless. But the infamous hog crop. Used that, and it was a little awkward, I'm sure, at the beginning, being a young angler, not taken seriously, I'm sure, by some store owners. And when you walked in there with this plastic, I'm sure they were a little hesitant.
Yeah, Jared Dean, famous jig maker here in Ontario, still makes fun of the hog rod to this day. Oh, wow. But to be honest, all of the things that I've ever done or had the opportunity to do, it really comes down to one thing. It was a means to an ends. You know what I mean? Like I never had this great thing that I want to be a lure manufacturer, but I wanted to find a way to make a living and not stop fishing. And so all of the stuff that I did growing up, whether it be writing or, the lure thing and stuff like that, it was literally just a means to an end because I'm like, man, in a few years, like I was smart enough to know that like in a few years, this school thing's going to end and people are going to want me to become an adult. And I don't want to become an adult. So I'm going to make an adult decision and try to turn this into a business.
Well, you did a fantastic job of that. And this is where I want to know, was it at 15 or before that you realized that you were making more from tournaments than some of your friends were with summer jobs?
Yeah, well, my friends were losers. I mean, you really need to dig deep into these bios. It sounds good, but I had a lot of, no, not really. But I mean, that was in high school. Yeah. I mean, It was great because in high school, I didn't have a summer job. All my buddies worked at farms or, the local grocery store, stuff like that. I just fished tournaments and actually got into guiding at a really young age. And the reason I got into guiding again was just simply because I was standing at the right place at the right time. And I said, I'd like to do that. And it was a local tackle store that would, set up guided trips on Scugog. And they had several guides, but one of them didn't show up one day. And I was always saying, hey, I'll take someone. And I took them and we had a good day. And for the rest of my life, basically all the way, until I was done school, that's what I did for a living. I fished tournaments in the summer and did a lot of guiding. But so I mean, again, a means to an end because I'm addicted to that little tap at the end of the line.
Now, this bio that I paid a nickel for tells me that at 19, when you were done high school, and like most of us had a victory lap in there, this is where you became very serious about tournament angling and basically wrote the history to what is known as Dave Mercer's career. But then this was really cool, and I hope I'm right with this. At 21, you approached the new VR.
Yeah.
For that 60, and I remember I looked far and wide for a clip back in the day of that, but I do remember that. Jim, do you remember those VR
very
clips?
Very much so. I hated him when he got to do something like that, and I didn't.
Did you really hate me, Jim?
Never.
A little bit?
The only time was when we fished together when you were young, and you caught the one fish we caught all day.
You got me back plenty. Don't worry. But the new VR was actually new at the time for people from Ontario. It's the Barrie Station, and at the time I had this idea, and it's everywhere now. But at the time there wasn't any short form programming on TV. Literally it was. I used, if you remember, Body Break. I mean, everybody saw that. It was a participation thing. Hal and Joanne, Body Break. They do their fitness tips. I knew I couldn't do that, but I was like, I can do fishing tips. And I remember Bill Patrick was the station manager at the time. And this is before you could just email people. Like, it was a lot harder to get in touch with people back then. And I cold called the station for literally 6 months. And I was just like, hey, I want to do this tip thing. And he did admit to me afterwards, like, the only reason I said, come on in, was because I was tired of you always calling. I'd always called, not every week. I mean, I'm not a stalker, but a lot. So I got to go to the network or the station, and I showed up and I said, hey, I want to do these fishing tips and blah, 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 and rattled on some crap about how I thought it would be really cool. And he said, well, we'll send you for a screen test. Now, before he did that, he said, hey, do you have any experience in television? And I'm like, oh, well, I was on it once. But other than that, nothing. I mean, I watch it. And he's like, so you never went to like broadcast school or anything like that? And I'm like, no, I didn't. He said, well, we'll send you for a screen test. And I didn't know what that was. But he said, he said, is your boat here? And I said, no, it's at home. And he said, well, go home, get your boat. How long is it going to take you to get back here? And it's like a 3-hour round trip for me to go back and forth. It's really only 2 hours. But at the time I was driving a brown Nissan Pathfinder that my friends called caramel corn for 2 reasons. It was brown and kind of looked like caramel corn. It was a light tannish brown. And the real reason was, I mean, it had no floorboards. They were, I don't know. I'm pretty sure I paid for a safety somewhere. And if you drove it for over 45 minutes, the carpet on the floor would start to burn, and it smelt of caramel corn. So I would literally have to travel with like jugs of water to dump on my carpet. And I got prepared for this trip back because I don't have time to pull over and let my carpet cool down, right? This is important business. So I get back there with my boat and everything. And I remember walking into the lobby, like how stupid I must have looked. And I'm like, I'm here for my screen test. And I remember the receptionist gave me a weird look, but I was like, yo, I'll show you. And the camera guy came, and he was a great dude, but thought I had no idea what I was doing, which he was right. We went down to the water, we launched the boat, and I'm like, okay, what do we do now? And he's like, well, I got to put this microphone on you. And I put it on. I'm like, okay, now what's next? And he's like, well, go. And I'm like, what do you mean go? He's like, well, what were you sent down here to do? I'm just supposed to shoot it. And I'm like, well, they sent me for a screen test. And he kind of sat there for a second. And he's like, well, just tell me how the fishing's been this year. Right. And I just rattled on some crap about weed growth and how the year had been and everything. And literally, he packed up his camera, took the microphone off me, and said, okay, bring me back to the station. And I had no idea, like, is this good or bad? But I'm all right. I brought him back to the station, dropped him off, and took caramel corn right back home, round trip. Had to stop, fill up the jugs with water. And when I got home, that's before everyone had cell phones. Like, how old am I? I'm telling stories before freaking technology that everybody has today. But before cell phones, there was cell phones, but I couldn't afford to get a vehicle that didn't catch fire, never mind a cell phone. So I got home and there was a message on the machine from Bill Patrick, and he said, "You better watch the news because you're going to be on it tonight." And I high-fived everyone. I'm like, yeah, I'm on TV. Got paid absolutely nothing for it. But for about 6 months, I really thought I was doing something, and then somehow figured out the sponsorship deal and how you monetize things on TV. And one thing led to another. And at one point, those tips were airing 500 times a week. So, and we aired on the Daytona 500 and some really cool spots. And the whole idea behind it was, there's lots of, believe it or not, at the time I was selling against half-hour shows. Like, I'm like, oh, you don't need one of those half-hour shows. You need 1-minute tips. And I still think it was perfect at the time because a lot of anglers didn't watch tips, but they did learn because they watched the Weather Network, and things like that we were on. So it worked out really good. And then years later, somehow I started selling a half-hour show.
Well, and before that, you got into the DVDs, and I have 4 of them anyway. Were there only 4, Dave, that you produced for? I guess they were what, volumes? 4 volumes of.
Yeah, it might have just. I think it was 4, 4 or 5, because basically what happened with those. That's what everybody would always say from the tips. Like, when are you going to get into a half-hour show? And I'm like, no, I don't ever want to do that. It's just it's different. It's like I've always tried to be different. The reason I started the DVDs was while I got a sponsorship from Bass Pro, and George Wallace, who was working there at the time, was so great to work with. And he's like, hey, why don't you do a DVD? And and we talked about it and put it all together. And for a time, it was actually only available in one location, but it was the #1 selling DVD in Bass Pro Shops company-wide. The only person that beat us that one year was freaking Larry the Cable Guy. But
and he's gone on to all kinds of fame and has crashed and burned. And look at you, Dave. You're still soaring.
No, he's soaring. But here's the difference. I'm still working because I haven't had the success he's had. People in his line of work, I mean, he can just change his voice. But what? I'm happy with my life. How about you guys?
Absolutely. And one of the things that I truly loved about your DVDs and all your tips and tricks and techniques is how candid you are. You're the real deal. And I want to play this to just show folks just how real you are.
One of the key components of how we're catching these fish here today is right here. And we don't do a lot of crazy product stuff on Facts of Fishing, but I'm going to tell you, Mega Imaging blows me away. Honestly, side imaging was such an innovation, to be able to see out the side of your boat, to be able to see structure from above, not just that 2D, view that we have. With Mega Imaging, you see every single detail. You work the whole way along this break, and I'm marking, not just big boulders, I'm marking individual pebbles and rocks. It just changes your outlook. And the more you know about the area you're fishing, I say this all the time, the more you actually know about that area, the more you can understand. That's why a lot of anglers are better anglers when they fish shallow, when they have visible structure, because they know what they're fishing. When you get offshore and you're fishing blindly, it becomes a lot tougher. So the more educated you are, the area that you're fishing, and today we've just been keying in on that transition from 12 feet right up to the shore and throwing this bait around. There's logs, pebbles, you can see that entire edge there. That's the beauty right there. Look at that edge, and that has that turns, and you can mark it the whole way. That's our boat line, and you see that edge kind of peaks out here. So what I'll do when I'm working, watch the rocks, keep trimmed up, it's important. But no time for trimming up when we're marking spots. Look what I'm doing right here. Just zoom that over to the spot, hit mark, and now I have an actual waypoint marked in that spot. So as I idle along here, I'll work that entire transition, and it speeds up your fishing time. But as I always tell you, safety's important, and make sure you're trimmed up around obstructions. I did that just to show you how these mistakes can happen when you get excited about little green fish.
That's what I'm talking about. I tell you, you tell it as it is. You are as honest as the day is long, and I love your candid approach to everything you do, Dave. It's great. To continue on, obviously, we'll get to your videos and some of the awards that you won. But as I said, 2007, Facts of Fishing hit the boob tube, where it's now been for 15 years.
Yeah.
Outside of a couple of videos that I want to share, is there anything that really stands out as really cool that, that was on my show, and I'm really proud to say that it was?
The thing that stands out to be really cool with our show is the crew of people that work on it. To be honest, it's not like a lot of people would expect, oh, it was this one fish or it was this one spot, and it's never that. Like it's that I've been lucky enough to work with amazing people that always push, you know what I mean? Like our crew, literally, like I'm probably a jerk to work with at times because I'm always saying, like, what can we do different? What can we show different? Whether it be from above, below, we're always pushing to do stupid things that just add to different shots and give people a different perspective. So that's probably what I'm most proud of. I mean, that we've been able to do some really cool things, different angles and change the way a lot of shows are shot. Like when we first started the show, most shows were shot with one camera, and now there's very few shows that are shot with one camera. So it's been cool to work with an amazing team. That's what I'm most proud of. Whether it's, Nick and the whole guys from Vantage Point, I mean, they've always pushed things, you know what I mean? And whether it be, hey, we need to figure out how to strap a GoPro to a fish, or we need to cast a lure with a camera on it, different things like that. We try to push limits. And the reason that my thought has always been that that's what you got to do is because I'm not trying to sell fishing to you guys. You guys fish, you get it, Jim gets it, but that there's so much more to fishing outside of literally setting the hook. I mean, setting the hook's what we all think of, but it's the feeling you feel when you're immersed in that area, when you're outdoors, and the sounds. And so it's always been kind of our goal to try to bring people that never have experienced that and put them there, you know what I mean? So they feel like they're there. And it's tough to do on TV, but I think the crew I've worked with has done a pretty good job of doing it over the years. And that's what I'm most proud of.
And we will get to how critically acclaimed that crew is in just a second. But we wanted to share this. Jim, I hate putting you on the spot, but you're a good sport. This was truly something that was funny. And as CFNers, it may be the first time you've seen this, or perhaps you've been to the Facts of Fishing YouTube channel. But Jim, be prepared.
I got big shoulders.
But I can't stress the importance of checking your line and retying. Today's lines are super strong and abrasive resistant, but when you're fishing a bait like this crankbait, you're gonna bang into things and get a tiny little nick in your line, and it's game over. The last thing you wanna do is be lazy, not retie, and end the day with a good long cry. Rhymes like that, you see that? I'm like Dr. Seuss of fishing. I could have written The Cat in the Hat, I'm pretty sure. Oh, there's one too. Double header, dude. Double header. Oh, dude, don't. So important. Don't rush that fish. This fish did the exact same thing yours did. Jim, you still got your fish back there?
Yeah, he's chilling.
He's just relaxing. Look at that one hook in his face. He's not a giant, but if you take your time, you get him in the boat. Nice work, brother.
Oh no! Took your rod. You took the rod. You took the rod.
That's my favorite rod and reel.
Oh no! Took your rod. You took the rod. You took the rod.
As you can see, you put these crankbaits in front of them, and they do what they're naturally meant to do, and that's eat it. But just a little tip. I mean, make sure if you got one and it's the side of the boat, don't set your rod down. Very important. I think he's gonna punch me.
So I'm pretty sure Dave didn't. or Jim didn't punch you, Dave. But yeah, tell us how that day all unfolded, Jim.
Well, what it was he was hamming it up, and I thought he had like a 10-pounder or something. So I put the rod down underneath the console. I mean, underneath the console, you'd think it'd be pretty safe. The walleye was this long. What it was it wasn't the walleye that pulled it out of the boat. It was either a big pike or a muskie. So it was one of those things, but it was so funny. That look on my face there, that wasn't joking. I was serious. That was my favorite crankbait rod. That was when I was in my crankbait life stretch. And it was just the best crankbait rod ever on the face of the earth. And I caught one, 2 days before I caught one that was 12 or 13 pounds on it. And it's coming back on me.
Yeah. And the best part is he turns to me right away and he's like, "You're not going to show that on TV, are you?" And I'm like, no. We're going to show that on TV, on the internet. We're going to show that everywhere we can. This is TV gold.
He didn't care if he lost the fish once he saw the rod go up.
That's hilarious. Well, speaking of TV gold, one of the things, Dave, that I truly admire with your crew is the detail and the imagery. And in 2017 at the Outdoor Sportsman Awards, you took home the Golden Moose. Your entire crew did. And you won, I think, a couple other awards that night as well. But the fact that you were to win this as the first fishing show ever to win for best videography, truly, I understand why. Because anybody that has not been to your YouTube channel or seen any of your segments, any of your Facts of Fishing episodes, I invite you to do so. There's still time. Go back, have a look, because, yeah, the cinematography is just second to none, Dave.
Again, but I get to work with the best people out there. You know what I mean? Like whether it's, like I said, Nick and Vantage Point crew, or Brian Bonin, the first guy that I worked with when we put it together. It's always been people that, like if you get somebody who comes and just wants to set up a camera and shoot, they're never going to hang on our shoots. Cause that is a prime example. That thing that you just saw with Jim, the coolest thing about that isn't that it happened. It's that we were able to capture it. And the only reason we were able to capture it is because at the time we were strapping GoPros all over the boat. And it was that extra effort that catches those moments. You know what I mean? And all the dumb crap that happens on our show, like hitting the rocks and doing whatever. I wish, like, people think you set stuff up, but ask Jim. It's just, we just go fishing and buffoonery follows. And
spontaneous. Well, to put it this way, that day when we filmed that, I was absolutely shocked. I don't remember the young lad's name you had working with you. Like, obviously Ryan was there, whom I spoke with today, as a matter of fact. That's funny. I had a chat with him today. But you put a young kid out with a GoPro on a pole up on a cliff, remember?
Yeah.
Over by the point, and I thought, they're not coming back for him. They're just going to leave him. He was new. He's expendable. But it was, and it was things like that. And I mean, I know you lose it. When you came over and filmed by here there, you were using drones. You got some just spectacular footage of fish coming up and eating crankbaits. I think, Scotty, we've talked about this.
Yep.
About some of the stuff that you got. When you see that big white mouth come up, and you just have to keep filming. And then, like as Dave knows, one day you get 3 or 4 really good things. Then maybe nothing happens for a month, and then you get a whole bunch of good ones again. It's just the luck of the draw.
100%.
It's like any business, though. And I really do feel that. Like whether you're a tournament angler, like the tournament anglers that make the Elite Series, people ask, like, what's the difference between Elite Series Pro and a regular, tournament angler? It's everything. Like they think about everything. They maximize the time. But it's the same thing when you're shooting a show. It's a lot easier to shoot a show and just go and just put a camera up and shoot. And the most successful show monetarily in the history of fishing is probably Bill Dance's. But there was already a Bill Dance's show. Our goal was always to try and do something a little bit different. You know what I mean? Something that, and now, like, I mean, that always is weird with me. Like, I'm obsessed with shooting underwater stuff now. And that kind of started during COVID with all the crap shutting down and the stupid rules that they made. So I was swimming places and shooting and doing more of that. But when you see some of that stuff, or you see cool things like that, there's people are like, how do you do that? What's the trick? There's no trick to anything. You just show up every day and you do it for more hours than anybody else. You know what I mean? And generally, if you do that, you'll get better at it and things will turn out the way you want.
And I couldn't agree more, Dave. But one of the last trips down memory lane was in 2018, where you were inducted to the Canadian Sport Fishing Hall of Fame, and you joined the accolades and are rubbing shoulders with the elite when it comes to Canadian angling. And to that, on behalf of CFN, congratulations on being inducted and awarded with such an award. But truly, it's well deserved for everything that you've done, not only for Dave Mercer, but for Canadian angling. And I'll tell you this, the coolest thing, something that I truly respect about you and was really excited to have you on is, you host all those Bassmaster tournaments. Like, I do this CFN on a very small scale, and getting ready for that, and knowing, your guests as they come on, and paying the $1.25 for their bios that obviously weren't worth written on. Either way, as I said, doing that and the fact that you do it the way you do, I mean, you have a flair about everything. You've got, cool little Mercerisms. You've got your entire group of mercenaries that follow you. And you do this in front of hundreds and thousands of people with millions watching, and you do it in a country that you weren't born in. Tell us how cool that was, and perhaps how hard it was breaking into the American scene as a Canadian.
I mean, first of all, I mean, the Hall of Fame thing is probably one of the, I mean, it's definitely something if I'm being totally honest, I kind of wish I didn't get inducted when I did. It was a weird time in my life. There was a lot of business changes and stuff like that. And it was super. I mean, trust me, I am so thankful. I'm obsessed by my hat. It keeps getting crooked. I don't know. I'll just be honest. So when you see me messing with my hat, it's like when I keep looking there, I look like I'm trying to be cool.
It's the shape of your head.
All right. Maybe it is. I'm physically crooked. So I kind of wish I'm so thankful to be there, but it's weird. Like, it was a weird time, you know what I mean? And those that were there know that. But it was the biggest honor I've ever, I mean, I didn't ever expect to be in any Hall of Fame. Because I really I won already. Like, I got to do this when I was that kid that was 18 years old, 20 years old, and wanted to fish for a living. There was a bunch of other kids that wanted to fish for a living that were my age. And some of those kids still work in the industry today and at different positions. But I got lucky. I got to do so. So it's so stupid that you get a job that you've dreamed of your whole life, and you just end up keeping that job long enough, and then somebody puts you in a Hall of Fame. I find, you know what I mean? Like, I think there's a lot of people that should be honored more than an idiot that just gets to fish for a living. So the Hall of Fame thing's so weird with me. I'm a weirdo with that. I'm really weird. I can stand in front of thousands of people and spit water and do all that stuff, but whenever it becomes about me personally, I'm a weirdo. So let's talk about the Elite Series, because that's less about me. But
yeah. And as I said, okay, so taking that approach, and I see it just in how you embrace Canadians that do very well. And of course, Gussie, the Snow Leopard, we've had him on here because of Jim, and we had some great conversations with him. But I can only imagine for those Canadian anglers that are taking the podium and are doing very well and perhaps winning these Bassmaster Elite Series tournaments. You give them that comfort, it's the mother or father, away from home. But how cool is it as a Canadian, a fellow Canadian, watching Canadians succeed so well?
It's pretty incredible to watch. I mean, to be able to be part of Bass has been, people tell you to have a 5-year plan and all those things, and I think that's important in business. But I also think it's important not to write down plans, because some of the stuff that I've been freakishly lucky enough to be able to do in my life, if I wrote it on a piece of paper 5 years before I got the job, there's not a person on earth that wouldn't have laughed me. You know what I mean? Like literally the year before I got the job, I sat in the Bassmaster Classic, had no idea that next year I'm going to be on that stage. That's how crazy your world can be if you don't put limits on it, you know? So to have those three guys down there competing, to me it's special just because I feel like, I mean, it's cool. You know what I mean? Like I had the greatest job in the world and it just even got cooler somehow. You know what I mean? Because now I get to share it with, and it was good last year in the last 2 years because the border has been hell. So it's good to have people to call and take your pressures out on because it was hell for those guys too.
Well, I'll tell you, this part of the segment right there is something that I'm going to go back and probably watch a million times because, as I said, it's that sense of being so genuine that I truly admire you. But the fact that you are the host and a heck of a host, my Lord, it's incredible. Now, listen, Jim, I'm done with the $1.25 bio.
I want to say something though because I am. And even more so in the last number of years than I've ever been in my life. I am learned a long time ago just to always be honest. But even with stuff that people don't talk about a lot, like the Hall of Fame thing. I mean, and I'll be honest, my regret with that is at that time, I didn't almost get a chance to absorb it right. You know what I mean? It was a weird thing. And I made a lot of jokes and stuff like that. But I feel like I never got a chance to, hold the mic and be like, man, thank you to everybody like Jim and all of the people, Brooko, everybody that made this industry. Because without them, without the past, there is no future. And not that they're the past, but you know what I mean? That outside, Big Jim took me fishing when I was freaking 13 years old, which is changed my life. I mean, and I'm super thankful for that. And I don't feel like I showed enough reverence maybe in my speech.
Well,
it was more like a wrestling speech, kind of like.
You just did. Jim, what did you think of this 13-year-old that you took out fishing? Tell us, basically a timeline of how long you've known Dave. And
yeah, well, I'd known him for a little while, and he was a genuine whack job as a kid. There was no ifs, ands, or buts about it. This, I know, when I took him fishing, and then he got involved with us, and he was doing sports shows and stuff like that. He was at the infamous hotel the time they had to move us, and I let him share my room with me one night. We were in short rooms. He gets up in the morning, he's had a shower, and he's all excited. He's running around the room because he's going back to the sportsman show again. And there was a couple of ladies out in the parking lot there having something to say. So I said to him, go over to the window there and show them your physique in the window. So he's got the towel around his waist, and he goes over and he steps out on the balcony, and I locked the door.
He did. He went in and showered. Freaking March on the lakeshore.
His feet almost
showering, singing in the shower while I'm freezing out there.
His feet almost froze to the concrete, I think, if I'm not mistaken. But, little things like that go back. And, like he's just Dave, when he was a kid, was a joy to be around. And that's part of the reason he got the opportunities that he got. There's no fun being around somebody that's no fun to be around. And he was an absolute gem. And, I mean, if he was a gem then, my God, he's a diamond bigger than me now. Because it just, you know what I'm saying? It's just, he just, like, how do you do it better? And he does it every year. It doesn't make a difference if it's at the Bassmaster Classic or what it is. He's just an incredible person, and I'm just as blessed to know him. It's just I think things where people respect each other both ways in life are the best relationships that you have.
Well, absolutely, Jim, and myself on behalf of CFN, myself, we can't respect you enough for all you've done. And Dave, I will say this: when we played the tape of you introducing Gussie after winning last year, he said after we went off air, he's like, Scotty, I still have goosebumps. It's a true testament to what you are as a man, Jim, what you've done to mentor some of us. Some of us have done very well in your shadows, some of us continue to learn and persevere. But as I said, I know I speak for David and a lot of folks. Thank you.
Appreciate that. And Dave, it's like he talks about the Hall of Fame thing, but brother, you are 1,000% there. You are 1,000%. You're 1,000%. No offense or buts. But what I want you to do for the people is I want them to tell them the story about the day you went for your interview to be the MC for the Bassmaster Classic. It's my favorite story ever that Dave has, and it'll take him a couple of minutes if he has enough time. We might have to run.
No, totally. No, the reason I looked up, I wasn't looking at a clock because I have something that's part of that story on the wall here. So that's why I looked up at it. I wasn't clocking you guys. We can take all the time in the world. I'm going to bitch about it afterwards to my wife that you guys took forever, but we can take all the time in the world. If I wanted this to be shorter, I would have shorter answers. But I'll gladly tell that story. But before I tell that story, one of the things that you just mentioned a minute ago, and I tell my kid, I find myself paying more attention. That's damn hat. Screw the hat. Oh, I gotta put it back on. Hold on. Hold on. I forgot. Too much damn Shimano love on this show, anyways. Before, one of the things you mentioned, and I tell my kids this all the time, and it's almost like I've just really learned this in the last, like it's almost become even more apparent to me in the last number of years. People talk about in remove fishing, think about it in hockey terms or whatever. People talk about talent and everything in different areas. Talent doesn't matter. Literally the most successful people I know on earth, they all have a talent, and maybe it's a genuine talent they've had their whole life. But they're two things. They work really hard. They're fun to work with. And when you think about it, if you really think about the people, and not everybody's going to be jokey and whatever, but as far as people can be fun to work with and they're not jokey, they're just fun to work with because they get their job done. You know what I mean? But really, that is the truth in life. Like, if you really think about it, we see people squander talent every single day in every single walk of life. You see people and you're like, man, that is such a talented person that threw it away. And you see that all the time. If you're willing to work hard and you're decent to be people, that's, I think, why you get opportunities. Like, I've sat and thought about it. Like, how the heck did I end up, working for Bass, and never mind working for Bass, but emceeing, you know what I mean? To me, it's so unfathomable, but it literally just came from me working, you know what I mean? And being decent to people. I really just think that so long story short, at one point I said to Mark Zona, and me and Kevin Van Dam and Zona became very friendly for whatever reason. I mean, clearly why I was their friends, freaking Kevin Van Dam and Mark Zona. It's pretty easy people to be friends with. But I don't know why they were my friend, but we started to hang out a little bit. And one night in Vegas, we're at a bar called Stacked, and we are hanging out there. And somehow it came up about Bass, and I just out of nowhere said to Zona, I'm like, hey, dude, if Bass is ever hiring, like for anything, I'm all in. And he's like, really? And I'm like, yeah, I'd love to do that. I'd love to work with Bass. And again, I didn't know what I'd be doing. I thought I'd, be doing little tips or something like that. So 2-3 different interviews, I go down and meet Mike McInnis and all these different people. But ultimately it gets to this point that they've told me that we want to hire you as the MC, but you need to meet Jerry McInnis and get his stamp before you can get the job. Now, Jerry McInnis, for a lot of Canadians, we don't know Jerry. But Jerry has hosted the second longest running show on ESPN to Sports Center, their Sports Center. He ran a show for 41 years. Jerry McInnis ran a show called The Fishing Hole that if you ask Bill Dance today, Bill Dance will tell you, I would never have a fishing show if it wasn't for Jerry McInnis. So that gives you an idea of the person that he is. And I was well aware of that. So I fly down to Little Rock, Arkansas to meet Jerry McInnis, and I don't ever get nervous. Like I really don't. It's just a weird thing. Like I get uncomfortable. Like when you guys were talking about me earlier, I hate that. That to me is the most uncomfortable thing in the world. But I don't get nervous. But I did this time because I'm like, now I'm being told, well, this is your dream job. And you know, you're going to have to meet this guy. And it's, you know, the 2 and 3 other interviews to me weren't that nerve-wracking because I always figure out I'm not going to get it anyways, right? I'll just have fun and do whatever. So I fly down to Little Rock, me and Jerry sit down. And when you walk into Jerry's office, it is like the Bass Fishing Hall of Fame. Like you walk down and there's all jerseys from all the, like Takahiro and Mori's jersey from the I Knew It Classic, like all of that. You're walking past all of that and you're like, and as a bass fishing freak weirdo that I've always been, like to me, I'm like, this is hallowed grounds. It's amazing. So I go into Jerry's office, and Jerry's office is even better. Like his freaking office has got it's like imagine a really cool Toronto warehouse feel. You know what I mean? Like the brick walls and everything. He's got big, and guess what his freaking office looks over? Bassmaster Studios, like the studio that you see Tommy Sanders on and, you know, Zone It Now, but he looks down on it. So I go in there and it's just the coolest place ever. And I'm, you know, excited. Jerry had a little dog. I'm allergic to dogs, but I was petting the crap out of that dog because I'm like, if this dog doesn't like me, like Jerry loved that dog. So an interview with Jerry McInnis is not like an interview for any job you've ever applied. Like we talked about bass fishing. We talked about smallmouth. We talked about baseball, all these different things. And then every once in a while, Jerry would throw out some, you know, reference like, you know, to work. And it would just be a weird work question or whatever. But then we'd go for another hour talking about whatever. So we're 3 hours deep into this interview. And he hasn't even really talked to me about the job. It's all about, you know, that's how Jerry is. And so we're 3 hours into it, and they had just bought bass. And he said to me, he's like, you know, Mercer, he says, you know, I can't believe how much support we're getting. He said, you know, since we bought bass from ESPN, it was himself, Don Logan, and Jim Copeland. The 3 of them came together and bought bass. So, and saved bass, if you're being totally honest. Like there was a lot of people who were like, man, this is going to go away because ESPN had run their course with it, and ESPN discards a lot of things. So if they didn't buy it, who knows if it ever came back. So he says, we are getting so much, you know, Mercer, we're getting so much love. And he's pulling out these magazines. Like we got an article here, we got an article here. And then he pulls out this Basser magazine, which is basically the Bassmaster magazine in Japan. And it's a beautiful magazine and everything. And he opens it up, and inside it, there's a picture of him and everything. And he's like, even in Japan, they're giving us good press. And my dad used to tell me growing up, he's like, son, you need to learn to put your brain in gear before you put your mouth in drive. And it is a skill I have not yet mastered, as you probably have.
I'm getting excited.
and like when he said to me, but I can't read it, before I even knew it, like I didn't have a filter, but I like just said, I can read it to you, Jerry. And he's like, and like as soon as I did it, I swear to you, like people talk about the hair standing up on the back of my neck. My hair was not standing up. I started sweating profusely. I'm like, oh God, I just lied to Jerry McInnis in his office. And all I've got is visions of my, you know, calling my wife on the way home. Honey, I screwed it up at the interview. And so he looks at me and he's like, what? He said, you can read Japanese? And you should not lie in a job interview, but if you do, you got to commit. I mean, it's too late to go back now.
Absolutely.
So I almost gave him like a tone of displeasure. I'm like, Jerry, do you want me to read it to you or not? And he's like, all right. He hands me the magazine. He just kind of sits back. And Jerry, he was one of those Southern gentlemen that, like, when you're telling me a story, or if I'm telling Jim a story, he makes facial expressions, and I can tell Jim's into this or not in this. Jerry's one of the Southern gentlemen that'll just like let it marinate, and you don't know what he feels like. So I'm thinking, I can read it to you. And I grabbed the magazine and get to the page, and I'm like, I said, it's a different dialect, but basically what it says. And I rattled off these 2 paragraphs, and I swear to you, I've never been able to do it. I think it was the ghost of my parents possessed me or something, because it came out so smooth that day. But basically it was like, Jerry McInnis has been a leader since day number 1. Whether it was his early history with the Oakland Athletics, baseball in minors, or reinventing the way TV is produced, his award-winning hit show, The Fishing Hole, and now producing Bassmaster, and basically kept going on and on and on, kissing his butt. And then the final line in it was, we at Basser Magazine have it under strict confidence that Jerry McInnis is about to make the most prudent business decision of his life and hire Dave Mercer to MC the Bassmaster Classic. And when I said that to him, I'm literally like, I might not have even made that face, but that's the face I was making, because I was just waiting for him to be like, get out of here, you idiot Canadian. And he looks at the magazine and he's like, looks back at me, and it felt like hours. And he's like, Mercer, you don't speak Japanese, do you? I said, no, Jerry, I don't. I do not. And he said, well, I think you'll do all right at this job. You're hired.
Come on.
That was the final, like I had gone through different things, but that was like Jerry's stamp. And I still, hold on.
Holy
My favorite story in the world.
There's the magazine right there. That's an actual copy of the magazine. And Jerry signed it. And it's honestly, he said, Dave, this issue will never be forgotten. Proud of your friendship, Jerry McInnis. And that's honestly one of the coolest things. I mean, it could have been can you imagine if I'd never got the job and I told that story? Like, I might have still been on this podcast if I never got the job, and I would have told that story, and you would have been like, oh yeah, you were going to be the Bassmaster MC, whatever, Mercer.
It's the best story. It's the best fishing story ever. I'm sure somewhere there's something, but when it comes to stories about fishing life, you win, buddy.
100%.
I'd hand it to you.
I absolutely. And to be honest with you, I don't even know where to go to after that. What a freaking story. You just, as they say, you can't make this stuff up. Holy
yeah. Well, since then, my next stop with Jerry was I emceed the next and I started at the Classic, which was stupid if you think back to it, like how weird it was to start there. But Jerry passed away over a year ago, and he was an incredibly special man, and always will be in my life. But he was great. Like, I mean, he called me up the week before the Classic, and he's like, I was just talking to Mike, who's my direct boss at Bass still to this day, his son. And he said, I think we might have made a mistake hiring this Canuck. And I said, Jerry, I can hear you. Yeah, I want you to know that I'm wondering I might have made a mistake hiring this Canuck.
Yeah, you can't. That's like a mic drop right there. You can't top that.
Dave, that beautiful home that he was building, did he ever get to live in it?
He did. And his family still owns it today. Nice. And Jerry had an incredible place down below, like he's on a mountain in Arkansas, basically over the White River. And that's where, like, Jerry's history is nuts. Like, do you realize Jerry McInnis built him and Forrest Wood were best friends their entire life. Literally their entire life, they were best friends. They met when Jerry was in the minors playing baseball, and he wanted to fish the White River, and he went and looked for a guide, and somehow he ran into this guy, Forrest Wood. Jerry McInnis helped Forrest build the first 5 Ranger boats ever. Like, when you look at like the history of what people like that have they literally are founding fathers of this sport, and like part of the reason that there is bass boats is because of the trout boats that Jerry and Forrest would use on the White River and adaptations that they made through there. It's wild.
Wow.
Yeah, it's really cool.
Unbelievable. That is extremely cool. Jim, before we go on, I know we wanted to keep the segment to an hour. Any last things that you wanted to ask Dave or bring up that will somehow top that? Because not much will.
It's not there. That's the coup de grace to me right there. It came up just at the right time. Like I said, I've known Dave forever. He's in my heart, and he always will be.
That's awesome. Well, one other thing that is really awesome, Dave, and I want you to tell us a little bit more about it, how we can get involved and help out. But Casting for a Cure, tell us when this started, why it started, and what you're hoping to achieve with this program.
Well, Casting for a Cure, like a lot of charities, started out of sadness, really. My mom got cancer and didn't survive. And that was her big thing. When she was sick, she was like, I'm going to beat this. And when I do, I'm going to raise all money for, Canadian Cancer Society and all these people that had helped her. So when she passed, we wanted to do something, and it's it's evolved just like everything, really. Initially, it was all just a cancer charity. And then, we donated a lot of money to cancer. We raised a lot of money, and we still do donation with that. But my daughter's autistic, and we saw that there was, things that could help. So it was it still is. It's so underfunded and we're so far behind in that. It's nuts, but it was something we could do to make an impact. We actually started giving money to Noah's Ark and different places like that are camps that help people, with sensory disorders, that get overstimulated and stuff when they have therapy animals and things like that there. So it's kind of evolved into that, but we have different events throughout the year. And to be honest, the last couple of years, we haven't done those events. And simply just because, number one, obviously it's been a weird environment, but number two, with everything going on and so many people being affected in so many different ways, we just didn't feel like it was the right time. But we will continue, that always. I mean, it's something we try. We supported ourselves and do different things every year at Christmas and stuff like that. But the big events we haven't done for a few years just because of all the craziness out there. And hopefully we get back to normal soon.
100%. Now, obviously, they can go to the Facts of Fishing website. You're also on Facebook. Is there anywhere else that people can go to learn a little bit more and get involved with Casting for a Cure?
Through the website is the best. I mean, through there, that'd be your best bet there. But we're on all different social medias and all that stuff. So yeah, find me on YouTube and the TikTok, the whatever. And I'm going to say that it's my turn to embarrass Jim. And he knows I have told him many, many times personally. And I don't think there is anybody in Canada, including Bob Azumi and everybody, that has physically, now I said this before, touched more children, I said once, and that didn't sound right. So I can't say it that way. But physically touched more people and got them into, there's nobody in this entire country that has touched as many people as Big Jim. And I'm not talking about the glamour of a TV show or any of that stuff. I'm talking about a guy that pulls over to the side of the road and sees somebody and changes their life. And that is the man that you get to work with. And I am so thankful to call Jim a friend, but to me, it's incredible what he's done. You know what I mean? I wish, when I look at what Jim's done, I'm like, man, I need to get to work and do some stuff. So thank you, Jim, for being an inspiration to all Canadians, and not just an inspiration, but somebody who has literally, like, every single trade show you go to, stand around him. Watch, you'll see sooner. Maybe it'll take an hour, but somebody's going to come up and they're going to give him a story about a divorce or something they went through. And he gave them a rod. And that's the only reason they're standing here today. And I'm not making light of that. It just happens over and over again because that's the kind of man he is. So thank you, Jim.
Thanks, my brother.
Well said. And we did our best to try and keep it to an hour. I can't think of a better way to lead this.
Yesterday was my birthday. I turned 68, and I got the Mercer clan singing "Happy Birthday" to me first thing in the morning. As soon as that happens, I don't care. On my birth, I could die on my birthday as long as I get the video of them singing to me. It's all good.
Don't die on your birthday. Then we'll live with guilt forever. Always you're singing.
Well, you hate introductions. We're going to leave from an outro from you. And I would say this is when you're at your second best, when you're singing or humming a tune. Dave, thanks so much for joining us tonight. This was a lot of fun. And to you, Jim, thanks for making it happen.
Thank you, guys. I'll be back anytime, but none of this more crap talking about me. Let's just talk about other people.
That's really I'm going to have to search another certain somebody to get information because, you know what, it's a good thing I can't run faster. I'd be catching up to him right now. But on that note, again, thanks, Dave. Thanks, Jim. And let's take it from there with our beloved Dave Mercer.
Well, as much as I hate to admit it, I guess we've run out of time. So I've enjoyed it, but I'm going to do something I haven't done since season 1. Turn out the lights, the party's over. They say that all good things must end.